My wife is the CEO of a publicly listed company, and I am nothing more than a small employee within her organization. Morning sunlight spills into the bedroom through a narrow gap in the curtains. I get up quietly, careful not to wake my wife, who is still asleep. Sujin, the CEO of Jinhua Group, the youngest and most accomplished female entrepreneur in this city. And me, Chinmo, just an ordinary employee in the marketing department of her company. 7 years ago, an accident changed the course of our lives. Who would have imagined that an ordinary marketing specialist would marry the CEO of a massive conglomerate? What's even more ironic is that our marriage remains a secret. No one in the company knows we're together. I tie my tie and study myself in the mirror. At 30, fine lines have already appeared at the corners of my eyes. Compared to Sujin, who carries an innate aura of superiority and elegance, I look painfully ordinary. Her father is a financial tycoon. Her mother is a famous lawyer. My parents, by contrast, are retired teachers from a small county. Remember to dress more formally for the board meeting today. Sujin has woken up at some point and is leaning against the headboard, watching me. Even when she's being considerate, her tone is always authoritative. Got it, Ms. Su, I reply deliberately in a businesslike manner. She frowns slightly, displeased. When we leave the apartment, we move in perfect synchronization, but separately. She takes the private elevator straight down to the underground garage. I squeeze into the employee elevator to the first-floor lobby. This has been our life for 7 years, like two parallel train tracks that never intersect. I in the company lobby, colleagues are chatting loudly. I heard CEO Su is announcing the acquisition today. That ice-cold beauty, who would even dare marry her? I lower my head and walk past quickly, my heart aching as if pricked by needles. No one knows that the ice-cold beauty they gossip about rests her head on my arm every night. Or rather, used to. Even that small intimacy has slowly faded away. I in the elevator, I run into Sujin's assistant, Lin Xuan. He's young, handsome, and always polite on the surface, but when he looks at me, there's unmistakable disdain in his eyes. Team leader Chin, good morning, he says loudly on purpose. I heard your department's performance was last place last quarter. I don't argue. I simply nod. These subtle humiliations have long become routine. Sujin has never once asked about my situation at work. Perhaps to her, it simply isn't worth mentioning. I in the conference room, Sujin presents the quarterly report. She's dressed in a tailored black suit, radiating elite confidence with every movement. I sit in the back row, looking at the woman who is legally my wife, yet feels impossibly distant. Next, the marketing department will present the new product promotion plan. Her gaze sweeps across the room and pauses on me for less than a second. I stand up, my palms slick with sweat. I stayed up for 3 nights straight working on this proposal, yet at this moment, I feel utterly uncertain. During my presentation, I notice Sujin frown twice while checking her watch. Lin Xuan leans over and whispers to someone beside him, the ideas are outdated. The data support is insufficient, Sujin says crisply. Redo it. After the meeting, I hide in the stairwell to smoke. My phone vibrates. It's a message from Sujin, there's a social event tonight. I won't be home for dinner. I stare at the screen for a long time before replying with a single word, okay. 7 years of marriage, and our conversations have dwindled to this, short, distant, like roommates sharing an apartment rather than husband and wife. When I leave work, heavy rain pours down. I hesitate at the company entrance, debating whether to call a taxi. Then I see Sujin's Bentley slowly drive out of the garage. Through the window, she's talking with Lin Xuan, standing very close to him. Rain soaks through my shirt, but I don't feel cold. This marriage was a mistake from the very beginning. I should have realized it much earlier. How could the CEO of a listed company ever truly love an ordinary employee? I turn and walk into the rain, deciding that tonight, I will finally have a serious conversation with Sujin. 7 years have passed. This absurd marriage should come to an end. I remember that night from 7 years ago with painful clarity. I had joined Jinhua Group only 3 months earlier, still a clueless rookie. The marketing manager dragged me along to an industry cocktail party as a substitute attendee. the banquet hall of the Imperial Hotel glittered with gold and jewels. I felt awkward and out of place in my rented suit in a corner. I noticed a woman in a dark green evening gown standing alone. She was like a solitary bamboo stalk, calm, elegant, and completely out of place among the clinking glasses and loud chatter. That was Sujin, the heir of Jinhua Group, freshly returned from overseas to take over the family business. Chinmo, go deliver a glass of champagne to CEO Su, the manager whispered, giving me a shove. Be sharp. Don't mess this up. I walked over nervously, palms sweating. When Sujin took the glass, our fingers brushed briefly. She pulled her hand back almost instantly, a faint frown appearing on her face. New here? She asked coolly. Chinmo. Marketing department. 3 months on the job, I answered honestly. She nodded and said nothing more. Just then, a waiter leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Her expression changed slightly before she followed him toward a side room. Something felt wrong. The waiter's eyes darted around nervously, and his name tag hung crooked, as if hastily put on. I set the glass down and followed them quietly. At the end of the hallway, inside the side room, Sujin was surrounded by 3 men. One of them was Xiao Shikai, the young heir of the rival Hanyuan Group. The other 2 were clearly bodyguards. Miss Su, drink this and we'll be friends, Xiao Shikai sneered. Otherwise, tomorrow's headlines will be full of photos of the Jinhua heiress drunk and disgracing herself. Sujin's face turned pale, but she straightened her back. Xiao Shikai, you know the consequences of this. Consequences? Xiao Shikai laughed loudly. After we're done with you, your father will be begging me to become his son-in-law. My blood rushed to my head. I charged forward. CEO Su. The chairman is looking for you. I shouted, positioning myself in front of her. Xiao Shikai's expression darkened. Who's this little lackey? Get out. One bodyguard tried to shove me aside, but I grabbed his wrist and flipped him over my shoulder. My college judo finally came in handy. The second bodyguard lunged at me, but I sidestepped, only for Xiao Shikai to kick me from behind, slamming me into the wall. Call the police. I yelled to Sujin that I in the chaos. Sujin stomped on Xiao Shikai's foot with her high heel. As he screamed in pain, she grabbed my hand and ran. We ran all the way to the parking lot. Her hands shook as she pressed the car lock. Get in, she ordered. The car sped away from the hotel. Only after driving a long distance did she finally pull over, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Thank you. After a long silence, she spoke those 2 words. That's when I noticed blood trickling down my forehead, probably from when I hit the wall. Sujin rummaged through her bag and handed me a tissue, her fingertips trembling slightly. I'll take you to the hospital, she said. No need. It's just a small injury, I replied, pressing the tissue to my wound. But Xiao Shikai won't let this go, she sneered. He wouldn't dare, she continued coldly. What happened tonight would only destroy him if it got out. The atmosphere inside the car was tense. I stole glances at her and noticed her long eyelashes, high nose bridge, and profile so perfect it looked sculpted. Why did you help me? She suddenly asked. I hesitated. Anyone would have done the same. Not really, she shook her head. In the workplace, most people would have turned a blind eye. When she dropped me off at my rented apartment, rain was pouring down outside. She hesitated for a moment, then reached into the back seat and handed me a black umbrella. See you Monday, Chin Mo. It was the first time she had ever called my name that I kept that umbrella. Its handle was engraved with the letters SW, Sujin's English name. Later, I found out that night she could have called a driver or a bodyguard, but instead she had them handle another urgent matter. If I hadn't happened to show up, the consequences would have been unimaginable. A week later, I was summoned to the CEO's office. Sujin sat behind a large desk, sunlight pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows and casting a golden halo around her. I'm transferring you to be my personal assistant, she said directly. Double the salary. I was too stunned to respond. That position was usually reserved for people who had studied overseas or had strong connections. Why me? I finally asked. She set down her pen and looked straight into my eyes. Because you're not afraid of trouble, and you're not greedy. After a brief pause, she added, and you're tight-lipped. Just like that, I went from being an ordinary employee to the CEO's assistant that I followed her everywhere, gradually learning about the dark undercurrents beneath this glamorous business world. With every crisis we handled together, my relationship with Sujin quietly changed. It wasn't until that rainy night, when she got drunk after a failed project, that everything took a sudden turn. That I was taking her home when she suddenly grabbed my collar and said, "Chinmo, let's get married." I thought she was just rambling while drunk. But the next morning, she appeared at my apartment with 2 copies of an agreement, her eyes clear and sober. "The prenuptial agreement is ready. Just sign it," she said calmly. "I need someone who won't betray me." I should have refused. But for some reason I couldn't explain, I signed it. Perhaps from that night at the banquet, the wheels of fate had already begun turning in an irreversible direction. The day we signed the prenuptial agreement, Sujin took me to the Civil Affairs Bureau. No flowers. No rings. Not even a smile. The entire process felt like signing a business contract, except the contract lasted a lifetime. "After the wedding, you'll move into my apartment," she said while driving. "You can put your things in a guest room." I stared out the window, my throat tightening. Why me? The car stopped at a red light. Sujin tapped her fingers lightly against the steering wheel. Her nails were neatly trimmed, painted a subtle nude shade. "You saved me," she said after a pause. "And you're clean." "Clean?" I asked. "No complicated social ties. No bad habits. No skeletons in the closet." Her tone was clinical, like she was evaluating a commodity. "Most importantly, you're not like the others, always scheming to get something from me." I smiled bitterly. So in her eyes, I was simply the safest choice. The first night I moved into her apartment, I lay awake in the guest room, tossing and turning. The luxurious top-floor apartment in the city center felt cold and hollow, every corner radiating a detached elegance, just like its owner. At 5 in the morning, noise from the kitchen woke me. Sujin was already dressed, brewing coffee. Seeing me, she nodded lightly. "Good morning. Do you know how to use the coffee machine?" "Yes," I replied, walking over and accidentally brushing her elbow. She immediately stepped aside. That deliberate distance became the unspoken rule of our marriage. She gave me a secondary bank card, but I never used it. She arranged a driver for me, but I insisted on taking the subway. I cooked dinner for her birthday, but she worked late at the office. 3 months into our marriage, Jinhua Group faced a hostile takeover. Sujin didn't come home for an entire week. I brought a change of clothes and some stomach medicine to the company to find her. When I pushed open her office door, she was slumped over the desk, asleep. The computer screen was still on, and a half-finished cup of cold coffee sat beside her. I gently draped a coat over her shoulders. She jolted awake and instinctively grabbed my wrist. "It's me," I whispered. She relaxed and rubbed her temples. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking if you're dead yet," I said half-jokingly, setting a thermos box on her desk. "Eat something." She stared at the hot food, her expression softening for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, picking up the chopsticks. That night, I stayed with her in the office. At 3 in the morning, she finally couldn't hold on and fell asleep against my shoulder. I could smell her perfume, faint and mixed with exhaustion. In that moment, I realized that beneath her strength, she was fragile too. But the next morning, she was cold and distant again, as if the reliance of the night before had never happened. Time slipped by like sand through an hourglass. 1 year. 2 years. 3 years, our marriage became a strange symbiotic arrangement. To outsiders, we were a loving couple. At home, we were strangers sharing a space. In the 5th year, Sujin's father suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. I stayed there for 2 full weeks, driving her back and forth and taking care of him. One late night, she came out of the ward and saw me sitting on a bench in the hallway, eyes bloodshot. "Go get some rest," she said. That I stood and handed her a cup of hot milk. "You need rest more." She took it, her fingertips cold. We sat side by side in silence, the sharp smell of disinfectant mingling with the faint trace of her perfume. "My father always hoped I'd marry someone from a family of equal standing," she said suddenly. "He still doesn't understand why I chose you." My heart clenched. "Yeah, why?" She looked at me. Something flickered in her eyes, but in the end, she only shook her head. "Go sleep. There's a board meeting tomorrow." That was the closest we ever came to opening up. Like a match struck in darkness, bright for an instant, then gone. That I in the spring of the 7th year, Sujin secured the company's largest overseas project. At the celebration banquet, she drank more than usual. As I helped her home, she leaned against me, her breath scented with red wine. "Chun," she slurred my name. That my heart raced. "Tomorrow, remind me to check the quarterly report." I smiled bitterly as I helped her onto the bed. Even drunk, her mind was still consumed by work. As I tucked her in, my hand brushed her cheek. Unconsciously, she nuzzled into my palm like a spoiled cat. The closeness made my chest ache. Only in moments like these did I feel that she belonged to me. The next morning, she was back to her usual self, neatly dressed, reviewing reports at the table as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," she said without looking up. "The coffee's in the pot." I poured myself a cup and sat across from her. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing her in gold. 7 years, and she was still beautiful, beautiful enough to break my heart. "Sujin," I finally gathered the courage to speak. "Wait." Her phone rang. She answered, then stood quickly. The client from Singapore arrived early. "I need to go to the office." At the door, she turned back. "What were you going to say?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Hope it goes well." The door closed behind her, the sound echoing painfully through the apartment. I stared at the cup of coffee she hadn't finished and suddenly realized our marriage was just like it, calm on the surface, but long since gone cold. That I first met Sujin's family 3 months after our marriage, when her father, Su Hungru, celebrated his 60th birthday with a banquet at the family's old residence. That morning, Sujin tossed me a refined gift box. "Put this on," she said. 6 o'clock tonight. Don't be late." Inside was an expensive custom-made suit, the fabric smooth as water. As I stood before the mirror tying my tie, Sujin walked over, frowning slightly as she adjusted it for me. "The bow tie is too loose." Her fingers brushed lightly over my Adam's apple, sending a subtle shiver through me. "Remember," she said softly, "no matter what you hear tonight, keep smiling." The Su family residence was located on a mountain on the outskirts of the city, a 3-story villa blending Chinese and Western architectural styles. As we entered, the butler's scrutinizing gaze made me uncomfortable. The hall was filled with the fragrance of fine clothes and the presence of politicians and business elites. Su Jin clung to my arm, her smile flawless, though her body was stiff as a board. "Gina, is this your husband?" A well-dressed woman approached, her gaze sweeping over me like an X-ray. Su Jin nodded. "This is Chun Mo." "Oh, the little clerk." The woman's red lips curled into a mocking smile. "I heard your parents are teachers." I tightened my grip on my glass. "Yes. They teach at a high school in the county." "Oh, humble," she elongated the word before turning to Su Jin. "Your father nearly had a stroke, you know." Su Jin's expression didn't change. "Aunt, excuse us. We need to go wish Dad a happy birthday." After leaving the crowd, she whispered, "Don't mind it." "I don't mind," I said, tugging at my tie. "I should have worn my own clothes." She glanced at me. "That suit was a giveaway from a charity auction. The tags are still on it." I froze, not expecting her to notice such details. Su Hongru sat at the head of the table, his silver-gray hair meticulously combed, his gaze sharp as an eagle's. Even seated, his tall frame was imposing, and Su Jin's eyes and brows resembled his dad. Su Jin stepped forward. "Wishing you happiness as vast as the East Sea, and longevity as enduring as the South Mountain." The old man grunted, his eyes settling on me. "This is the person you chose." I stepped forward respectfully, presenting my gift. Uncle, happy birthday. This is a small token from Su Jin and me. Uncle? The old man sneered. You're married and you still call me uncle. A few quiet laughs rippled around us. My ears burned. Dad, happy birthday. He didn't take the gift. Instead, he turned to Su Jin. The Wong family's son just returned from Wall Street yesterday. You should meet him. Su Jin remained expressionless. I'm already married. Is that really called marriage? The old man raised his voice. You didn't even have a wedding. How do we know you're truly married? Sweat broke out in my palms. Indeed, our marriage felt more like a transaction. No wedding, nothing. Dad, Su Jin's voice was icy. If you don't welcome us, we can leave now. The old man slammed the table. Nonsense. The banquet hall fell silent, all eyes on us like prisoners under a spotlight. Uncle Su, please don't be angry. A young man in a dark blue suit stepped forward. Jin Jin was just confused for a moment. His affectionate tone twisted my stomach. This had to be the Wong family's son, a Harvard graduate from a real estate family, a perfect match for the Su family, Mr. Chun, right? He turned to me and extended his hand. Nice to meet you. I hear you're an assistant at the Jinhua Group. I shook his hand. Yes. I handle the marketing department. Ah, the marketing department. He smiled knowingly. That must be fulfilling. A few chuckles echoed around us. To these people, my position was probably worth less than an ANTT dinner. I was seated at the far end of the long table beside Su Jin's cousin, Su Ruer, a carefree rich second-generation heir. He kept pouring me wine, subtly probing into the history of my relationship with Su Jin. Honestly, he leaned over, his breath thick with alcohol. How did you manage to win my sister over? She was famously known as an ice queen. I clenched my dinner knife. We're very much in love. In love? He scoffed. Come off it. Who doesn't know what this marriage is about? My sister just grabbed some random nobody to marry purely to spite the old master. His words stabbed into my heart like daggers. Indeed, the nature of this marriage was crystal clear, even to outsiders. After the banquet, Su Jin was summoned to the study by the old master. I stepped into the garden for air, but the night breeze couldn't dispel the suffocating ache in my chest. What's wrong? Can't take it anymore. My aunt's voice came from behind. She leaned against a veranda pillar, smoking. Divorce sooner rather than later. It'll be better for both of you. I turned to her. Thank you for your concern, but we're doing just fine. Stop pretending, she said, exhaling a smoke ring. Gina has always been headstrong. She'll do anything to defy the old master. You're merely a tool for her rebellion. I gazed silently at the distant mountain silhouettes. Her words were a mirror, reflecting a truth I had long refused to face. Su Jin looked pale when she came out. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. It wasn't until we entered the city that she finally broke the silence. About tonight. I'm sorry. It's fine, I said, watching the flowing lights outside the window. Your family is right. I'm not good enough for you. She slammed the brakes, tires screeching sharply. Listen. She turned to me, her eyes glinting in the darkness. I chose you for my own reasons. What others say doesn't matter. What matters is what you think. I stared at her, stunned. In 7 years, this was the first time she had expressed herself so unequivocally. The words died on my lips. I wanted to say I had loved her since that night at the cocktail party. Wanted to say that even though this marriage began absurdly, I had long taken it seriously. Wanted to say that as long as she needed me, I would always be by her side, but in the end, I only said, I understand. Disappointment flickered across her eyes as she turned away and restarted the car.at. That moment, I realized we had both been waiting for the other to take the first step, yet both were held back by pride and fear. Back home, she went straight into the master bedroom, the door closing with a sound like a sigh. I stood in the living room, staring at our wedding photo on the wall. A supplementary shot taken after registration, both of us standing stiffly, with enough space between us to fit another person. For 7 years, that photo had hung there like a meticulously staged performance. Tonight, I finally understood my role in this marriage, a prop to make up numbers, a convenient shield. Tragically, even knowing all this, I still couldn't stop loving her. It was a rainy night, I remember it clearly. The company's quarterly audit had just ended, and I had worked overtime for 3 straight days. My eyes burned as if filled with sand. At 11 that night, I dragged my exhausted body back to the apartment building. Raindrops struck my face, chilling me to the bone. Just then, a familiar black Mercedes slowly approached. It was Su Jin's official car, usually driven by old Zhang. But tonight, Lin Xuan, her special assistant, was behind the wheel. That I instinctively ducked behind a pillar, though I didn't know why. Rain trickled down my neck into my collar, yet I felt no cold. All the blood rushed to my temples, throbbing violently. After the car stopped, Lin Xuan hurried around to the passenger side, opened an umbrella, and carefully helped Su Jin out. She was unsteady, leaning limply against him. He held the umbrella with one hand and wrapped the other around her waist. They stood impossibly close. Mind the steps, I heard him say gently. Su Jin murmured a response, her head resting on his shoulder. Under the streetlight, I saw the unnatural flush on her cheeks. She was clearly drunk. The tenderness in Lin Xuan's eyes as he looked down at her sent a wrenching pain through my stomach. They walked toward the apartment entrance like that, clinging together like an intimate couple. The rain blurred my vision, but the image burned itself into my mind, his hand on her waist, her hair brushing his cheek. I stood in the rain, feeling something shatter inside my chest. In 7 years of marriage, Su Jin had never shown me such vulnerability or dependence. She was always flawless, composed even when drunk. My phone vibrated. A message from Su Jin, have a social engagement tonight. Won't be home for dinner. I stared at the message she had sent an hour earlier, the corners of my mouth twisting into a bitter smile. So this was what a social engagement meant, a private rendezvous with her assistant, and, won't be home for dinner, turned out to mean needing someone to escort her home in an embrace. The elevator numbers climbed one by one. I stood at the corner of the hallway, watching Lin Xuan support Su Jin as they stopped in front of our apartment door. He reached into her bag and took out the keys, his movements so practiced it was as if he'd done it countless times before. The door opened. He guided her inside, and the sound of it closing echoed sharply through the empty hallway. I stood outside the door for 10 minutes, maybe longer. Rainwater dripped from my hair, soaking into dark patches on the carpet. Countless images flashed through my mind, the exchanged glances between Su Jin and Lin Xuan in the meeting room, the brush of his fingertips when he handed her coffee, the office gossip about them. The door suddenly opened. Lin Xuan walked out, adjusting his shirt collar. He looked startled when he saw me, then a triumphant smile slowly spread across his face. Team leader Chun, so late, he said, pointedly glancing at my drenched clothes. President Su had too much to drink. I just brought her back. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Thank you for taking care of my wife. My pleasure, he shrugged. After all, for these 7 years, I've been the one taking care of her, in all respects. Blood rushed to my head. I almost threw a punch at that smug face. But in the end, I simply stepped aside to let him pass. Confronting someone like him would only lower my own dignity. I closed the door. The apartment was pitch black. A thin sliver of light seeped from beneath the master bedroom door, and I could faintly hear the sound of running water. Su Jin was showering, using the body wash I had personally chosen, sleeping in the bed whose sheets I changed every week. I sat on the living room sofa, soaked to the bone, with no desire to change. On the coffee table sat half a glass of water and 2 hangover pills. Beside them lay Lin Xuan's handkerchief, expensive silk, his initials embroidered neatly in the corner. The bathroom door opened. Su Jin stepped out in a robe, her hair still dripping wet. When she saw me, she froze visibly. What are you doing here? Her voice was thick with intoxication. this is my home, I replied calmly, my voice so unfamiliar that even I didn't recognize it. She rubbed her temples. I mean, why are you soaked? I forgot my umbrella. I stood and walked toward the study. You should rest. I still have some work to do. She looked as though she wanted to say something, hesitated, then simply nodded and turned back toward the master bedroom. The sound of the door closing felt like a blade severing the last connection between I and the study. I opened my computer and pulled up the divorce agreement I had prepared long ago. It had been sitting on my hard drive for 2 years. Every time Soo Jin and I argued, I would open it, read it, then close it again. Tonight, I pressed the print button. As the printer hummed, I scrolled through my phone's photo album. There were only a few pictures of us together, standing politely side by side at the company's annual gala, a shot of her back as she walked ahead of me on a business trip, and that counterfeit wedding photo. 7 years of marriage, and not a single genuinely intimate photo. The agreement finished printing. I signed my name, my handwriting incredibly steady. Perhaps because this decision had been forming in my heart for so long, carrying it out felt as calm as still water. At 3 in the morning, I lay on the study sofa, clutching a blanket, listening to the faint sound of her breathing from the master bedroom. The rain outside had stopped. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the floor. I stared at them, remembering that rainy night 7 years ago, the black umbrella she had handed me, and her words, "See you on Monday, Chun Mo." How could I have imagined then that this marriage would end like this? Not because of differences in social status, not because of family opposition, not even because of her indifference, but for the most cliched reason of all, betrayal. When daylight came, I would place the agreement on the dining table, pack my bags, and leave. 7 years of affection, ultimately severed by just a few sheets of paper. Ludicrous, and yet fair. Chapter 7. I divorced her and also resigned from her company. Because of the prenuptial agreement, we each kept our respective assets, and the divorce went smoothly. Morning sunlight stung my eyes. I woke on the study sofa, still wearing the shirt that had been soaked the night before, dried stiff by my body heat, clinging to my skin and reeking of rain and sweat. On the dining table, the divorce agreement was already laid out beside a steaming cup of black coffee, Soo Jin's usual morning ritual. She sat across from me, dressed in a sharply tailored gray suit, her makeup flawless, showing no trace of last night's intoxication. What's this? She nudged the agreement with one finger, her voice cold as ice. As you can see, a divorce agreement. I pulled out a chair and sat down. According to the prenuptial agreement, we retain our premarital assets, and marital property will be divided 50-50. I've already signed. She stared at the papers, her face slowly paling. Because of last night? Not entirely. I picked up my coffee and took a sip, bitterness spreading across my tongue. This marriage was a mistake from the beginning. We both knew that. Lin Xuan just drove me home, she said suddenly. There's nothing between us. I laughed softly. No need to explain. It's been 7 years, Soo Jin. Have we ever had anything between us? She froze, as if struck. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating her clearly. I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the slight tremble of her lips. This woman, always so invulnerable, finally showed a crack. I thought. Her voice was barely audible. I thought we were doing all right. All right, I repeated, the words weighing like stone on my chest. Yes. Treating each other with distant respect. Not interfering in each other's lives. That is all right. She shot to her feet, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. What do you really want? I want a real wife, I said, standing as well. Not a formally distant cohabitant. I want someone to ask me how my day was when I come home. Not just cold notes and text messages forever. I stopped. I want you to love me. The words caught in my throat and never came out. Soo Jin stood there like a flawless statue, only the slight trembling of her fingers betraying her emotions. We faced each other across the dining table. 7 years of marriage balanced on that moment, as light as a feather. Fine, she finally said, her voice returning to its usual calm. I'll sign. She picked up the pen and signed her name, each stroke crisp and efficient, as if she were signing an ordinary contract. I watched her write Soo Jin, suddenly remembering her expression 7 years ago at the Civil Affairs Bureau when she signed the marriage registration, so calm it was almost cold. I'll move out today, I said, no need. She closed the folder. I'll stay at my parents' place for a while. You can continue living here. That won't be necessary. I shook my head. I've already found a place. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then simply nodded. As you wish. An hour later, I had packed my luggage. Truthfully, there wasn't much. Most items were bought after marriage and should be divided according to the agreement, but I didn't want any of them. I packed only one suitcase, some clothes, my laptop, and that black umbrella engraved with a W. Soo Jin stood at the doorway with her back to me, her shoulders rigid. About the company, I said, zipping the suitcase shut. I'll submit my resignation letter. I won't be going in today. I'll hand my work over to Shelley. That's not what I meant. She turned around, her eyes frighteningly red. You can stay at Genoa and watch you and Lin Xuan show up together every day. I gave a bitter smile. No, thank you. Her lips trembled. Chinmo, do you really think I would? It doesn't matter anymore, I cut her off, pulling my suitcase. I wish you happiness. As I walked out the apartment door, the sunlight was so blinding I couldn't open my eyes. 7 years ago, I entered this marriage empty-handed. Now, as I leave, I am still empty-handed, except for a heart full of scars. The divorce proceedings went surprisingly smoothly. The prenuptial agreement protected both our interests. There were no arguments, no acrimony, as clean and efficient as ending a business partnership. On the day we received the divorce certificate, Soo Jin didn't come. She sent her lawyer instead. Miss Soo asked me to convey to you, the lawyer said, pushing up his glasses, that should you need anything, you may contact her at any time. I smiled faintly but said nothing. As I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, a light drizzle fell. I didn't open my umbrella, letting the raindrops hit my face and mix with my warm tears. The resignation process was just as simple. The HR manager looked at me with eyes full of sympathy. News of my divorce from Soo Jin had already spread throughout the company. As I cleared my desk, Lin Xuan leaned against the doorframe, a look of feigned regret on his face. Such a pity, Team Leader Chun, he said deliberately loudly. We won't be seeing you around anymore. My colleagues cast curious glances my way. I calmly stuffed the last few books into a cardboard box. Take good care of her, I said. That he froze for a moment, clearly not expecting that response. Cradling the box, I walked toward the elevator, feeling his chilling gaze on my back. The moment the elevator doors closed, I let out a long breath of relief. 7 years. I was finally free, from this absurd marriage, and from a self that had always lived in Soo Jin's shadow. My new rented apartment was in the eastern part of the city, much smaller than Soo Jin's mansion, but filled with sunlight. I lay on the floor of the empty living room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, and for the first time, I felt I could breathe freely. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Soo Jin. Have you settled in? I stared at the message for a long time, but ultimately didn't reply. Divorce is like an amputation. Pain is inevitable, but only by severing completely can the wound begin to heal. As night fell, I turned on my computer and began sending out resumes. 30 years old, it wasn't too late to start over. This time, I would live for myself. No longer someone's husband. No longer someone's appendage. Outside the window, city lights turned on one by one. One of those lights belonged to Soo Jin, but from now on, it had nothing to do with me. 3 weeks after the divorce, Soo Jin called me at 2 in the morning. The ringing shattered the silence of the night. I stared at the flashing name on the screen, my heart pounding like thunder. Hello, I finally answered. Heavy breathing came from the other end, followed by the faint clinking of glass. She was drinking. Chinmo, her voice was slurred, laced with a vulnerability I had never heard before. My stomach, it hurts so much. I immediately sat bolt upright. Have you taken your medicine? There's stomach medicine on the second shelf of the cabinet. I can't find it, she gasped softly. You always prepared it before. Those words pierced my heart like a knife. Indeed, for 7 years, I had remembered her cycle, stocked her favorite coffee beans, reminded her to eat on time, and silently placed a glass of warm milk beside her when she worked late into the night. These habits had been woven into our lives so deeply that their absence was only noticed once they were gone. What about Lin Xuan? I forced myself to stay calm. Have him help you find it. There was silence on the other end for several seconds. He's not my assistant anymore. What? I fired him. Her voice grew faint. That night, he did try, but I pushed him away. My fingers clenched around the phone, knuckles turning white. What was this? A belated explanation? A ridiculous confession? Sujin, I took a deep breath. What you need now is stomach medicine, not your ex-husband. I'm sorry, she suddenly said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, Chinmo. I messed everything up. I froze at in 7 years. This was the first time I had ever heard Su Jin apologize. Sujin, always proud, always right, was sobbing like a little girl on the other end of the line. Don't hang up, she pleaded. Just talk to me for a while, okay? Like we used to. I closed my eyes. First, go to the kitchen. There's spare medicine in the small cabinet next to the electric kettle. Rustling sounds followed. She seemed to be moving as instructed. I could almost see her, barefoot on the marble floor, silk nightgown slipping from her shoulders, dark hair framing her pale face. This was the Sujin only I had ever seen. Sujin, with all her defenses down, found it, she said weakly, followed by the sound of swallowing pills. Now go lie down on the sofa, I said, my tone unconsciously firm. There's a blanket under the coffee table. How do you remember everything? She murmured, her voice soft in a way I found unbearable. Because I love you. The words hovered on my lips, then dissolved. What was the point of saying them now? Get some rest, I said instead, Chinmo. She suddenly called my name urgently. I want to see you. My heart skipped. Why? The keypad lock on my apartment is broken. I can't find the warning card. A flimsy excuse that I almost laughed. The president of Jinhua Group couldn't find a locksmith's number. Sujin, I sighed. Don't do this. A long silence followed, so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Just as I was about to hang up, she spoke softly. I got used to someone making me coffee every morning. Used to a light being left on when I came home late. Used to, her voice faded. Used to having you in my life. My eyes burned. 7 years. This was the closest she had ever come to a confession. Sleep, I said quietly. The pain will ease once the medicine kicks in. Will you hang up? She asked carefully, like a child afraid of being abandoned. No, I lay back down on the bed, placing the phone beside my pillow. I'm right here. Her breathing gradually evened out, occasionally interrupted by soft, uncomfortable murmurs. I listened until she finally fell into a deep sleep. As dawn approached, I gently hung up the phone, my chest filled with a strange, tender ache. At noon the next day, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Su Jin standing outside, dressed in a simple white shirt and jeans, no makeup, dark circles heavy beneath her eyes. She clutched 2 takeout bags, biting her lower lip nervously. I opened the door. Her familiar perfume mixed with the scent of sunlight. I was just passing by, she said awkwardly, lifting the bags. I bought your favorite Cantonese dim sum. Too much of it. I looked at her transparent excuse, passing by after crossing half the city, and my heart felt tightly gripped by an invisible hand. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She entered cautiously, her gaze sweeping over my modest apartment, faltering when she spotted our photo by the bedside, the only one I'd taken from the old place. Does your stomach still hurt? I asked. She shook her head and began opening the containers, her movements clumsy, nothing like the decisive businesswoman the world knew. I asked Lawyer Zhang, she said quietly. The divorce agreement, it can still be rescinded. I paused, chopsticks in hand, and looked up. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the slight tremble of her eyelashes. Why? I asked softly, her fingers twisted together. Because. I realized. Realized what? That she was used to being taken care of. That life had become inconvenient. Or that I realized I love you, she finally said, her voice as light as a feather. Yet it stirred a hurricane in my heart. I froze. Those 3 words I had waited 7 years to hear were spoken just like that, on an ordinary noon, drifting across a table beside a takeout box. It's too late, Sujin, I heard myself say, the color instantly drained from her face, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I know I have no right to say this, but please give me a chance. All right, I said quietly. Just one. I looked at her reddened eyes and suddenly remembered that rainy night 7 years ago, the warmth of her fingertips when she handed me an umbrella. Fate, like a mischievous child, always makes us understand our hearts at the most inopportune moments. The dim sum is getting cold, was all I finally said. The light in her eyes dimmed, but she still managed a faint smile. Let's eat first. We ate the already cold shrimp dumplings in silence, neither of us bringing up the subject again. But I knew that some things, once spoken, could never be taken back, just like a 7-year marriage once ended. It was difficult to return to the beginning. That as she was leaving, she hesitated at the door for a long time before finally saying softly, I'll wait for you, no matter how long. After closing the door, I leaned against the wall and slowly slid down to the floor. My phone vibrated. It was a message from her. The keypad lock isn't broken. I just wanted to see you. That I stared at the message, a sharp mix of sourness and fullness tightening my chest. So even someone as proud as Su Jin would bow her head for love. I just didn't know if such an awakening had come too late to salvage our already shattered marriage. Su Jin began appearing frequently in my life, like a gentle invasion. Every morning at exactly 7, my phone rang with a good morning text from her. The office front desk always had lunch delivered, every dish one of my favorites. When I worked late, she would happen to pass by my office building and ask if I needed a ride. This way of pursuing me was endearingly clumsy, completely unlike the Su Jin who was so ruthlessly decisive in the business world. My colleagues started teasing me. Director Chun, is the president of Genoa pursuing you? I would only smile without committing to an answer. A month later, on a weekend, the doorbell rang again. This time, Su Jin held a thick stack of documents, her eyes shining with astonishing brightness. I've redrafted the agreement. She walked straight in and spread the documents across the coffee table. The prenuptial agreement is voided. All postnuptial assets are to be jointly owned, including shares in Genoa. I glanced at the densely packed clauses, my heart tightening violently. This meant that if we divorced again, she would lose half her fortune, a concession the president of a publicly listed company would never make lightly. Why? I asked, closing one of the folders. She stood by the window, sunlight outlining her with a golden halo. Because I want to start over with you, without calculations, without reservations. Sujin, I said after a deep breath. We tried. It didn't work. That's because I was too stupid. She suddenly raised her voice. 7 years. I was like a blind person, unable to see your goodness. You remembered all my habits, tolerated all my bad tempers, and I never even told you I love you. Her voice broke. This was the second time I had seen her cry. The first was on the day of our divorce, when she stood with her back to me, her shoulders shaking like a leaf in the wind. Not all mistakes can be fixed, I said softly. Give me 3 months. She grabbed my hand, her palm icy cold. If after 3 months you still don't want to remarry, I'll never bother you again. I looked at her crimson-rimmed eyes, remembering the late-night call about her stomach pain, remembering her standing at my door with takeout in her hands. In 7 years of marriage, she had never been this humble. Why 3 months? She bit her lip. The doctor said the first 3 months of pregnancy are the most unstable. My mind went blank. What? She gently placed her hand over her lower abdomen. 4 weeks. It must have been the night before the divorce. I stumbled back, knocking over the water glass on the coffee table. Water spread across the documents, blurring the carefully drafted clauses. Countless images flashed through my mind, her unusual passion that night, the marks on the bed sheets the next morning, her sudden pursuit over the past month. Is it for the child? My voice barely sounded like my own. No, she shook her head firmly. It was only after I found out I was pregnant that I understood. I want this family. I want you. Family. The word sounded both foreign and familiar coming from her lips. For 7 years, she had never called our shared apartment home, only the house or the apartment. Sujin, I began with difficulty. A marriage shouldn't be forced to continue for a child. It's not forced, she almost shouted. Chinamo, look at me. She made me meet her gaze. Those eyes that were always calm and composed were now filled with vulnerability and pleading, I love you. Not because of the child. Not because of habit. But because you are you. Sunlight danced across her face, and I could clearly see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the trembling of her lips. This woman, once so imperious, now laid bare all her weaknesses to me without reserve. 3 months, I heard myself say. Just 3 months. She threw herself into my arms, her tears soaking through my shirt. I breathed in the familiar scent of her shampoo and suddenly remembered that cocktail party 7 years ago, when she had leaned against my chest just like this. Back then it was out of fear, now it was out of love. That night, I moved back into the apartment. Nothing had changed except for a photo of us together on the nightstand in the master bedroom, a space that had always been empty before. Sujin, like an excited little girl, dragged me around to show me the nursery she had already redecorated, even though it was still far too early. Do you like blue or pink? She asked. Either, I replied, stroking her hair. As long as it's our child. She suddenly grew quiet, leaning against my shoulder. I'm sorry for making you wait so long. I didn't answer. I just held her gently. 3 months. 90 days. Enough time for me to see whether this marriage could still be saved. This time, there would be no prenuptial agreement, no calculations, only 2 battered but still beating hearts, and an unexpectedly conceived new life. Late at night, I sensed her quietly getting out of bed. Through the slightly ajar door, I saw her in the study, flipping through our wedding album, the album she had never paid attention to before. In the moonlight, her fingers gently traced my face in the photos, her touch tender, as though handling a treasure. In that moment, I suddenly understood that maybe love had been there all along. We had simply been too clumsy, too proud, taking 7 years to learn how to express it. 2 weeks into the 3-month period, Sujin's pursuit of me only intensified. Every morning, a fresh bouquet of white roses appeared on my desk. At lunchtime, she showed up punctually at the company cafeteria, sitting across from me without caring about the stairs. After work, her car was always waiting downstairs, window rolled down, her face carefully composed. Oh, Sue, I finally said one day, unable to take it anymore. You're making it very hard for me to work. She was in my office organizing files. God knew why the CEO of Genoa Group would personally do such a thing. Hearing my words, her hands paused, and a flicker of hurt crossed her eyes. I just wanted to help. I don't need help, I said, closing a folder. We need to talk. She sat down across from me like a child who had done something wrong, her fingers nervously twisting together. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting striped shadows on her face, and I noticed the deep dark circles under her eyes. Listen, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I understand your guilt, but this way of compensating isn't healthy for either of us. It's not guilt, she interrupted eagerly. Chinamo, I really. Suddenly, the office door swung open, and Department Manager Wong Wei stuck his head in. Director Chun, big news. Our company has been acquired. I frowned. When did this happen? Just now, Wang Wei said excitedly. I heard it was the Jinhua Group. Huh? CEO Su, what are you doing here? I whipped my head around to look at Sujin. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. You bought Karu? I asked in disbelief. She bit her lip. I just wanted to give you more room to grow. Good heavens. I stood up, my chest feeling as if it were being crushed by a heavy stone. Do you know what this is called? This is called control. No, it's not. She stood up too. Just what? I sneered. Making decisions for me again, just like that sudden marriage proposal 7 years ago. The color drained from her face instantly. Outside the office, curious gazes from colleagues pierced through the glass walls toward us. Let's talk outside. I grabbed my jacket and dragged her out of the company. In the underground parking lot, I released her wrist. A red mark had already formed around it. Sujin didn't cry out in pain, only looked at me with tear-filled eyes, like a wounded fawn. What exactly do you want? I demanded in a low voice. I want to make amends, she said softly. With money? With power? I shook my head. Sujin, you don't understand the problem at all. Then tell me, she suddenly raised her voice. Tell me what to do. I've never pursued someone like this before. Her voice choked, and in the dim light of the parking lot, I saw tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. It was only then that I realized the lofty Sujin. Perhaps she truly didn't know how to love someone properly. What I want isn't flowers, not a promotion or a raise, I said wearily. What I want is respect. Trust is, what? Loyalty, the word stuck in my throat. I couldn't say it. The image of that rainy night resurfaced in my mind, Lin Xuan's arm around her waist, her leaning against his shoulder. Forget it. I turned to leave. We both need to calm down. Because of Lin Xuan? She suddenly asked. You still don't believe me? I stopped without turning back. I believe my eyes. He did try to take advantage of me that night, but I pushed him away. She rushed in front of me. I fired him. What more do you want me to do? I want you to go to him. I finally exploded. Since you two were so close, why bother clinging to me? The words sliced through the air like a knife. Sujin staggered back a step as if she'd been struck. The parking lot fell deathly silent, broken only by the distant echo of dripping water. So that's how it is. She suddenly laughed, a smile more painful than tears. 7 years of marriage, and this is the kind of person I am in your eyes. She turned and walked toward her car. Her back was ramrod straight, but I knew she was crying. Sujin, who never showed weakness, had been shattered by my words. Sujin, I called out subconsciously. She didn't turn back, only waved her hand. Don't worry. I won't bother you anymore. With the roar of an engine, her car disappeared around the corner of the parking lot. I stood rooted in place, an unprecedented emptiness washing over me. I had won the argument, yet it felt like I'd lost something vital. Back in the office, Human Resources had already sent out a company-wide email announcing Karu's acquisition by Genoa. My promotion notice followed swiftly, Vice President of Marketing, reporting directly to the President's office. Congratulations, Mr. Chun. With President Su as your backer, your future is limitless. I forced a smile, but my heart felt as heavy as stone. My phone lit up. It was a message from Sujin. My resignation has been processed, effective tomorrow. Severance will be paid at the highest rate. That I stared at the message for a long time, but didn't reply. When I left work, a cardboard box sat on my desk. Inside were all the gifts I had given her during our 7-year marriage, a necklace I'd saved 3 months' salary to buy for her birthday, an out-of-print book she once mentioned wanting, and a photo of us at an amusement park on our first date. Beneath everything was a letter, her neat handwriting on the envelope, for Chun Mo's eyes only. That I didn't have the courage to open it. After carrying the box home, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the city lights outside the window. Behind one of those lit windows, Sujin might also be sitting alone like this. Was she regretting the words spoken? The phone rang suddenly. It was an unfamiliar number. Is this Mr. Chino? This is Lin Xuan. I tightened my grip on the phone. What is it? I think you should know the truth. His voice carried a hint of mockery. President Su was indeed drunk that night, but you'll definitely want to know what she said when she pushed me away. Speak. Don't touch me. I'm married. Lin Shu-yuan sneered. How ridiculous. Who in the entire business circle doesn't know your marriage is a sham? Yet she stubbornly held that line, even though you clearly don't care. He kept talking, but I could no longer hear him. All I heard was Su Jin's voice saying, 7 years of marriage, and this is the kind of person you think I am, and the image of her trembling shoulders as she turned away that I grabbed my keys and rushed out, but I didn't know where to find her. Her apartment? The company? Or had she decided to walk out of my life completely? The night wind slapped my face. I finally understood, I had been using that rainy night as an excuse. What I truly feared wasn't betrayal, but giving my heart again to someone who might hurt me. And now, I might have lost her forever. 3 days later, Su Jin's assistant, Xiaoli, called. President Su had a persistent high fever but refused to go to the hospital. When I rushed to her apartment, the passcode lock had been changed back to its original combination, our wedding date. As the door opened, the strong smell of alcohol and medicine hit me. Empty wine bottles and scattered documents littered the living room. Sujin was curled up on the sofa, her cheeks unnaturally flushed, wearing only one of my old shirts. You're here, she said weakly, struggling to sit up. Don't worry. This isn't some elaborate ploy to win your sympathy. I really just have a cold. I touched her forehead. It was frighteningly hot. On the coffee table were half a glass of water and a few fever reducers. She had clearly tried to manage on her own. Why didn't you take the medicine? I picked up the box. I did. It didn't work. She coughed twice. Maybe it's the flu. Without a word, I picked her up. She was terrifyingly light, like a feather. To the hospital, I said curtly. She struggled weakly. No need. I'll be fine after sleeping. Quiet. I tightened my arms around her. This time, you listen to me. She went still, burying her face in the crook of my neck, her scorching breath brushing against my skin. In that moment, I realized it was the first time in 7 years she had completely entrusted herself to me, without defense, without calculation. The hospital diagnosed her with pneumonia and ordered hospitalization for observation. Su Jin lay in the hospital bed on an 4-drip, looking like a fragile child. I sat beside her, watching her fever-chapped lips, my chest tightening with every breath she took. You can go, she said suddenly. You don't need to pity me. Don't talk. I poured a glass of water and handed it to her. She didn't take it, only stared at me. I finally understand why you insisted on a divorce. To be doubted by the person you trust most, it's a terrible feeling. My hand tightened around the cup, water spilling onto her hospital gown. She was right. I had used an unconfirmed suspicion to negate 7 years of marriage, just as her family had negated me back then. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She shook her head. I deserved it. How much security have I given you all these years? Outside, the sky darkened. The only sound in the room was the steady drip of the 4. Sujin's hand reached out from beneath the blanket and gently rested on the back of mine. It was still warm. Chinmo, she said softly. Will you promise me one thing? What is it? Next week is my dad's birthday. Come back with me. She coughed twice. Consider it a dignified end to our 7 years of marriage. I promise I won't bother you after that. I looked at her haggard face and nodded. Perhaps this was the right way to say goodbye, to end where we had begun. A week later, Su Jin was discharged from the hospital, though she still looked worn. The night before the birthday banquet, she messaged me to ask if I needed to prepare anything, her tone formal, like a business exchange. I replied that I didn't, and the conversation ended there. On the day of the banquet, I put on the suit she had once bought for me and drove to pick her up. Downstairs from her apartment, Su Jin was already waiting, dressed in a dark green evening gown, her hair pinned up, revealing her slender neck. Seeing my car, she was visibly startled. "Did you buy a new car?" she asked after getting in. "Rented," I replied, handing her a gift box. "A gift for your father. A Hetian jade chess set. You said he likes them." She took the box, her fingers trembling slightly. "You still remember?" I said nothing and started the car. Throughout the journey, we treated each other with polite distance, like strangers. Neither of us mentioned divorce or reconciliation. The Su family's old residence was brightly lit, bustling with guests. When we arrived together, Su Hongru was clearly taken aback for a moment before quickly regaining his composure. "Dad, happy birthday." Su Jin stepped forward, hugged her father, and presented the gift. "Chinmo specially picked this out for you." The old master accepted it, giving me a long, meaningful look. "It's rare for you two to come together." "Indeed," my aunt interjected, her voice sharp with insinuation. "To be so amicable even after a divorce, truly remarkable." A sudden silence fell over the room. Sujin's face turned deathly pale. That I stepped forward and gently wrapped an arm around her waist. "Who said we were divorced?" Sujin whipped her head around to stare at me, eyes wide. I gave her a faint smile. The lie came easily. Since this was the dignified farewell she wanted, I was willing to play my part in this final act. Inside the banquet hall, the familiar clinking of glasses and the hum of hollow pleasantries filled the air. I noticed Su Jin seemed distracted, her gaze drifting repeatedly toward one corner. "Not feeling well?" I asked quietly. She shook her head and forced a smile. "Just overwhelmed by memories." Halfway through dinner, a familiar figure entered the hall. Lin Shuan, dressed in a dark blue suit, walked straight toward Su Hongru and presented his gift. The old master clapped him warmly on the shoulder, treating him with the affection reserved for a son. My body tensed instantly. Sujin seemed to sense it and gently squeezed my hand. "He wasn't invited by me," she murmured. Chinmo," she began, then faltered. At that moment, Lin Shuan noticed us. A provocative smirk spread across his face as he strolled over with a wine glass, deliberately raising his voice. Well, if it isn't the ex-husband. President Su is quite sentimental, bringing her ex-husband to a family banquet. Even after the divorce. The surrounding chatter died instantly. I felt Su Jin's hand turn cold in mine. "Lin Shuan," she said coldly. "Watch your words. Did I say something wrong?" He shrugged. "Everyone in the business circle knows you two have already." "We're perfectly fine," I cut in, pulling Su Jin a little closer. "No need for your concern." Lin Shuyuan's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Then why has President Su been drowning her sorrows in alcohol every night lately?" "What? Enough," Sujin snapped. "Please leave." "On what grounds?" Lin Shuyuan sneered. "I was invited by Uncle Su, unlike some people who are clearly out of the picture yet shamelessly hanging around." I didn't wait for him to finish. I threw a punch. Lin Shuyuan staggered back, crashing into the champagne tower. Glass shattered, and shrieks filled the air. "Chinmo." Sujin grabbed my arm. Lin Shuan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, a savage grin spreading across his face as he straightened. "Hit a nerve, did I? Do you know what you saw that night? It was Su Jin rejecting me. She'd rather cling to a dead marriage than." Sujin suddenly lunged forward and slapped him hard across the face. "You're fired. Never show your face to me again." The hall erupted into chaos. Su Hongru rushed over, his face ashen. "Gina, mind the occasion." "Dad," Su Jin said, her voice shaking. "Do you know this man, the one you treat like your own son, almost assaulted your daughter when she was drunk?" The old master froze. Lin Shuyuan's face went pale. "Nonsense," he blurted. "It was clearly Su Jin who seduced me." "Security!" Su Hongru roared. "Get this man out of here." Amid the chaos, I pulled Su Jin out of the hall. I in the garden, Moonlight flowed like water over her trembling shoulders. Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? I asked. She looked up, tears shimmering. Even if I had, would you have believed me? In your eyes, I was already a cold-blooded, heartless liar. I reached out and wiped her tears away, the warmth grounding and real. 7 years of marriage, we had been like two blind people fumbling in the dark, hurting each other, never truly seeing the other's heart. I'm sorry, I said softly. She shook her head and pulled a document from her purse, handing it to me. This is for you. A declaration to nullify the divorce agreement. Whether you sign it or not is up to you. I took the document and tore it in half without looking. Sujin's eyes widened. I knelt on one knee and took her hand. Will you marry me again? This time, no prenuptial agreement. No calculations. Just you and me. Her tears fell heavily onto our clasped hands. You don't hate me. I did, I admitted. But I hated myself more, for my foolishness, for almost losing you. She threw herself into my arms, crying like a child. In the distance, faint music drifted from the banquet hall. But here, in this quiet corner, we had finally found our way home.